Well, after repeated calls to investigate acts of violence from abortion industry sympathizers, the FBA today finally announced that it will investigate the attacks and the threats. With me now to talk about it is U.S. Representative Dan Bishop, who's a member of the House Judiciary Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. He represents the 9th Congressional District of North Carolina. Congressman Bishop, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Joseph. I'm happy to be with you.
We are happy to have you. Were you surprised by the announcement today, finally, that the FBI is going to look into what is a rash of attacks against pro-life organizations?
Well, Joseph, it certainly is high time. I've followed the Washington Stand's listing of 50 separate incidents of vandalism or, in several cases, fire bombings. You've had attacks on churches in addition to the crisis pregnancy centers. And, that's just astonishing. Watching the clip of Nancy Pelosi is out of touch as ever. But, what we saw, it makes me think in the Judiciary Committee, we saw the Attorney General step out in just a matter of about 3 business days, to respond to a concocted set of allegations about threats to education officials, to school boards, because parents were showing up in school boards to speak out. And they called that, threats, and called for a nationwide set of meetings in every U.S. judicial district by FBI officials. So this is a little late from the FBI for sure, but it's welcome in any event, because that list of attacks on crisis pregnancy centers and churches will spin your head around. It is a mind-boggling, and it needs to be responded to by federal law enforcement, certainly.
Yeah, Congressman, do you think this is as simple as the Justice Department being in a place where they are not going to acknowledge that there is a potential threat from their side and wanting to just kind of delay that admission as long as possible?
Unfortunately, I think we've seen the most politicized United States Justice Department in memory. And so, yes, I think they're trying to keep a low profile about it. Frankly, if it weren't for the Washington Stand, I don't think the information would be available about all the vandalism and the attacks in one place. So I think it's been sort of given not much play in mainstream media either. And that's often how it works. Sort of corrupt corporate media cooperates with and aids and abets the Biden administration in ignoring serious problems until something really bad happens. I'm glad, though, that the administration is responding to this threat.
That's exactly right. And if people want to see that list that Congressman Bishop is referencing there, you can go to WashingtonStand.com, see that article. You can see all 52 documented cases. But another development from this week is that a group called Jane's Revenge, they've claimed responsibility for many of these attacks already. But this week, they published something of a manifesto where they said, quote, the leash is off. They said it is, quote, open season on other pro-life organizations moving forward. Do you think that is what finally has prompted the Justice Department to say, hey, we've got to get ahead of this?
I don't know. We've also seen the, what's the name of this one? There's something named after Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I forget what they call themselves, but they're the ones who are putting out, addresses of justices' homes and showing up at justices' homes, even after the guy showed up at Kavanaugh's residence to try to kill him. What the left will do in this country will not surprise those of us who are believers. We've seen it. And we respond to it appropriately, and we make sure we speak out for law and order. And we're sort of in a mess, but we're going to have to bear with one another and see to it that we do not allow this to happen to the Christian community.
You mentioned there the attempted assassination of Justice Kavanaugh, which thankfully was not successful, but it basically been admitted that that was what that young man was there to do. that provides some interesting context. That and the 52 attacks on pro-life organizations and churches around the country provide interesting context to the January 6th Commission hearings, which have been going on not quietly in DC. I'm not sure that the rest of the country has been tracking these very carefully, but of course, the purpose of that is to create the impression that there's all this danger, all this risk from right-wing extremism. Do you see irony in the fact that there's actually a dramatic increase in left-wing violence and extremism, specifically from the abortion industry, at specifically the time congressional Democrats are trying to prove that the real risk is from right-wing extremism?
Well, your point is well taken, Joseph. I think what's always been the problem with the Democrats and their grotesque political use of the January 6th riot at the Capitol is that they've always been out of proportion. Frankly, every Republican, I've never seen a Republican fail to condemn the violence on January 6th, but leftism has seen violence in all the way through 2020. Remember all that, where Minneapolis was, large sections burned to the ground, and all over the country in riots, BLM riots. And then, as you say, now this, by the way, the Washington Stand has a much longer list of violence directed against pro-life communities and churches over the last year and a half. But this spate subsequently, the left has been entirely violent. And so the January 6th committee seems to be sort of wrapped around an axle. They do not seem to, they're out of, it just emphasizes the way in which the left has been in Washington increasingly out of touch. That's all they can focus on. They have nothing new to say about it. It was a bad thing. And we need to see to it that that doesn't happen again. But the way you do that is protect the Capitol adequately. They haven't even looked into why we didn't do that. Why didn't Nancy Pelosi have appropriate amount of force out there to deal with the rioters or the protesters and some of whom became rioters on that day?
And I think it's important at this point in the conversation to underscore the fact that this is not whataboutism. This is not trying to justify extremism and violence by anybody's side, because the other side does it too. But what we have to do is come together and realize, and our worldview allows us to acknowledge that sin nature is bipartisan, right? And anybody can be driven to do terrible things if their hope is in the wrong things. And increasingly, I think our hope in the country is too much in politics. And so we get too agitated when things do not go our way, which leads us to do terrible things. And we all have the potential to do that, but we aren't going to solve that problem, if we are all intent on defending our tribe. And what we have to do is just generally recognize this is a problem. Now, Congressman Bishop, Senator Cotton this week called for Attorney General Garland to resign over his delay in responding to this. Do you think that's appropriate?
Well, I think there are many things over which it'd be appropriate for the Attorney General to resign. I made the comparison to this politicized activity against parents of school children across the country, and we've seen some more information come out about that. Yes, I think this is an intolerably slow response to a serious threat across the country. To this day, the Justice Department has not come forward to enforce the law that says that you can't have a protest designed to intimidate a judge of a United States court while a decision is under consideration. And that's what they're trying to do. These appearances outside the houses of the justices should result in arrests and convictions, indictments for that activity. So yeah, Garland is doing anything but his job.
And also at the Washington Stand, you can see some reporting this week about the slow response, and the fact that at least in the 12 blue states where this has happened, there has not yet been a single arrest in any of these dozens of cases. Does that mean that law enforcement just in general is dragging its feet on this issue? We certainly hope not. But Congressman Bishop, before I let you go, I want to get your response to the news from the Border Patrol that last month saw yet another record border crossings. What's your reaction to that?
Well, there you have another official that shouldn't be in his post. So Secretary Mayorkas of the Department of Homeland Security should be impeached, will be impeached. I'm confident. Kevin McCarthy has said so himself. And so what we see, though, in the report you just mentioned is a new record on top of all the records that have been set in the 2 years that Joe Biden has been in office, roughly year and a half. We've seen, if at this rate, 250,000 immigrants a month, that's basically a congressional district every calendar quarter of people coming into the United States. There's also, new reports on new high numbers of gotaways. Those are the people that Border Patrol never encounter. They never interdict or stop any of them. Of course, the ones they are encountering, large shares of those are being released into the United States on their own recognizance. And you have hundreds of thousands of people who have never been caught by Border Patrol because they're busy changing diapers in overwhelmed ports of entry and so forth.
Congressman Bishop, we are out of time. It is a national security issue. We appreciate you coming to update us on that today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Joseph.